Once again, very good morning to all of you anywhere in this world, and I welcome to my channel. And this is the part 4 of the unit tests in ASP.NET Core 3.1 controller logic, and we will be taking up the sample project, and I will be continuing with the session controller tests. So in the previous lectures we have covered the home controller tests. So you learn to understand the session controller index action method, return scenarios, and understand and test run the unit tests for each of the return scenarios with using the test explorer. So if you like my videos, please subscribe to my channel and click the bell notification icon so that whenever I upload a video, you get an instant message. So let's switch over to Visual Studio and the text project. So if you have followed my first 3 parts, you'll be knowing this session controller and how we installed and how we downloaded and installed the project from the Microsoft GitHub repository. So if you have not seen the first 3 parts, I do strongly suggest you to go to the first 3 parts before coming to this. But if you want to continue with this test, this part 4, it will be all right. You can still understand. So before actually explaining the index action method for the for the session controller, along with the 3 unit tests that belongs to 3 different scenarios for this index action method, I think it's better to run the test explorer to show you the final result, how the test explorer runs the test, passes and fails the test, and then we'll start explaining the stuff. We are ready to test the scenario of session controller test. So here I have picked up I have called this test explorer, and how? By clicking on test and then clicking on test explorer. Okay, so test explorer is there, so it has already run. So this session controller test, there are 3 tests as we have seen, all of them have passed, but I just wanted to show you once again. And if I highlight and then run these tests, then it will be again running and it will come back with this output. So now you can see that these 3 tests were rerun and then again it has passed. Now let's just for the sake of learning and some fun, let's change something. Let's see how to fail these tests. Let's fail these tests, So instead of test 1 in one of them, let me write test 4, just an arbitrary string test 4, and here instead of date created.day is 2, let's write 3, and then again just test this one, index returns view result with storm session view model. Okay, so let me run this test and see if it fails. Yep, as expected, this test has failed. Okay, so test details summary you can see. So expected test 4, okay, actual test 1. Okay, so this has failed on 2 counts actually. Now if you just put it back to what it was earlier, this will again pass. So let's do some undo stuff. Okay, or just undo this. It will be 2 again, and this will be test 1, and then let's again run this test. So resorting back to the original test parameters, the expected, so this is again passed. Now that we have seen the test explorer in action and seen the passed test and the failed test, and then cleared the bug in the failed test to pass the test, we are ready to now understand the actual unit tests and their corresponding action methods which trigger those tests. So let's switch over to the explanation now. So please bear with me, there's a lot of explanation, but if you hear from start to the end, you will really benefit from this lecture. Here is the session controller, which is also derived from the controller base class. Now this session controller in this sample app displays the information related to a particular brainstorming session. So the controller includes logic to deal with invalid ID values, like, this part of this index action method. If not ID has value, if it is invalid value, then it is redirecting to this action redirecting to the controller home with the action method index. So it is redirecting to the index action method of the home controller. So now there is another return statement if the session is null. So when the session is evaluated following this right hand side assignment statement, so if the session is null, so it is supposed to return a content with the session not found. And if on the other hand none of these conditions is true, that means the ID is value and session is not null, then a view model is created and the view is returned with that view model. So now we will see the test for this index action method. So now corresponding to each of these return scenarios, each of these three return scenarios, 1, 2, and 3, we have one test for each of these return scenarios. Okay, so let's click on to the session controller test.cs. Now I have covered in detail the naming convention of these unit tests. So, and fact is the attribute which is for the Xunit, because you are using Xunit framework here, using Xunit. So that first unit test is named index returns a redirect to index home when ID is null. That means this is the index action method and this is the scenario when ID is null, and what is the expected behavior? It is redirecting to the index home. So the arrange statement is actually calling it is actually creating a new session controller object when the session repository is null. Okay, and act is where we are calling a method. This unit test is calling a method controller.index method with ID equals null, because that is what the test is, when ID equals null. So if you keep it in a vertical document group, you can see and view it side by side and you can see for yourself what I mean. So if not ID has value, it is calling redirect to action with the action name index and a control name home controller. Okay, and the second test is for this branch. When the session is null, it should return a session not found. So what is testing that? So the unit test is named accordingly. Index returns content with session not found when session not found. Okay, so arrange statement is actually initializing a test session ID with a value of 1, and we are arranging the mock repository, mock repo, by calling the new mock this mock type and passing the iBrainstorm session repository, and then mock repo is set up. Okay, and then the controller object instance is created and it is actually passed with an argument of mock repo type object of the mock repo type. And in the act part, the index method is called for this controller with passing a test session ID. And assert is, what is assert? Asserting for equal, assert.equal, this equal method is called on this assert type or assert class with the content result.content to be session not found. So this is the string expected is session not found when this expression is called content result.content. Okay, and then thirdly, the third unit test was for this third scenario. When none of these are holding good, when the ID has some value and session is not null, then the index action method is returning a view with the view model. So index returns view result with storm session view model. So here the arrange statement is actually again initializing the test session ID with 1, and mock repository is set up with the similar statement as the second unit test. Okay, and then it is set up by calling the get by ID async method and passing the test session ID, and then calling the returns async. These are all async programming. So and like taking the first or default. So this is a complex set of lambda expression and async programming. And then in the controller, this new session controller object is created by passing the mock repo, this mock repo dot object. Okay, and then in the act stage, this controller, the index method is called by passing the test session ID to the controller. And in the assert, so there are 3 assert type. So first the view result is created, assert.isType view result, passing the result, which was the which came as the result of this act stage. And then the model was created by calling the isType method of the assert class and passing the storm session view model and using this view result dot view data dot model. So, and as there are 3 assert statement. First is model.name should be test1, and second is model.dateCreated.day is 2, and how it comes. Okay, so now your question could be, where do I find this model name to be test1, and how do we test for the model to be created on day 2, and what is the model ID? Okay, so these will again come for just for refreshing. If you look into the if you look into this get test sessions method within this session controller test, you will find that there are 2 sessions added. Okay, 2 sessions added to the list of brainstorm session, one with the ID 1 and the name of test1, and it was created on day 2. Okay, so date time int year month day, this second day, and for the ID of 2 with the name of test2, it was created on day 1. Right, so this way assert statements will actually look for whether the expected behavior, the first one is expected behavior, expected string is equal to the, is assert equal to the your actual string, okay, value. So now finally, so in today's lecture we have seen the unit tests for the session controller for the brainstorm session, and we have understood the action result and that it has got 3 return scenarios, and each one test actually it addresses one of these return scenarios. And we have seen the test explorer, how the test passes and how you can fail the test and again pass it by correcting the errors.